Lucas Crane glanced out the window, eyes drifting from the teacher's dull lecture to the overcast sky above. The bell had barely finished ringing, and already he felt the weight of boredom settling into his bones. His mind was far away, wandering through the pages of science fiction novels he kept hidden in his bag. Earth was fine, sure, but it lacked something thrilling, something out of reach. That's when he heard the unmistakable shuffle of feet at the door. The teacher paused, narrowing his eyes at the figure standing just outside the classroom. The rest of the students murmured, heads swiveling toward the door. As if out of thin air, she appeared. A girl with hair that shimmered like stardust under the fluorescent lights. Her skin was an impossibly smooth, almost translucent shade of pale, and her eyes, they were something else entirely. A color Lucas couldn't quite name, shifting like the surface of a distant moon. "Class, we have a new student," the teacher announced. "This is Lyra." She nodded slightly, her gaze sweeping over the room with an expression both curious and distant, like someone taking in the details of a painting from another century. Her eyes lingered on Lucas for the briefest moment before moving on, leaving him feeling as though she'd plucked something from his mind, some thought he hadn't even known was there. Lucas felt a sharp nudge in his ribs. His friend Sam leaned over, eyebrows raised. "Dude," Sam whispered. "She's different, right?" Lucas could only nod. Different didn't even begin to cover it. "Lyra, why don't you take the empty seat near Lucas?" the teacher suggested, gesturing toward the vacant chair beside him. She moved with a certain grace, her steps almost gliding as she made her way down the aisle. Lucas tried to keep his eyes forward as she settled in beside him, but he could feel her presence, an energy that was somehow both calming and disconcerting. He swallowed, casting a sideways glance. She was looking at him, her head tilted slightly, as if she were trying to solve a puzzle only she could see. "You're Lucas," she said, her voice soft yet somehow resonant, as though her words lingered in the air longer than they should. Yeah, that's me," he replied, caught off guard. "And you're Lyra?" She nodded, but there was a hesitation in her smile, like she wasn't entirely used to using it. "I don't know anyone here," she continued, her voice a murmur, as if she were unused to sharing something so mundane. "Well, that's okay," Lucas replied, trying to sound casual. "Welcome to Stanton High. It's, not exactly a tourist destination, but you'll get used to it." "Used to it," she repeated, like she was testing out the words. There was a flicker in her eyes, something Lucas couldn't quite name. Was it amusement? Intrigue? He had the sudden, unshakable feeling that she was hiding something behind that steady gaze, something he wasn't meant to know. For the rest of class, Lyra barely spoke, and yet her presence seemed to fill the room. Every time he tried to focus on the lecture, he found his mind drifting back to her, to that strange, unearthly way she carried herself. Who was this girl, and what was she doing in their small, uneventful town? The cafeteria was buzzing by lunchtime, students spilling out into the hallways, voices rising and falling in a familiar, chaotic rhythm. Sam slapped Lucas on the back as they joined the lunch line, still buzzing about the new girl. "You gonna talk to her again?" Sam asked, nudging him playfully. "Bet she doesn't even know what a cheeseburger is. Probably some vegan from California." Lucas shrugged, trying to look disinterested. "She seems, I don't know, different." "Oh, different?" Sam rolled his eyes. "Like, I'm different. I read science fiction books on weekends, kind of different?" "No," Lucas replied, his voice dropping. "Like, she's from another planet." Sam snorted. "All right, Crane, calm down. Just 'cause she didn't laugh at your lame joke in math class doesn't mean she's an alien. But go on, let's say she is." He leaned in conspiratorially. "How would you even know?" Lucas opened his mouth to argue but stopped. How would he know? It was ridiculous, of course. And yet, there was something about the way she'd looked at him, as if she could see parts of him he wasn't even aware of himself. The line moved forward, and they grabbed their lunches, finding their usual spot by the window. Lucas's eyes scanned the room, searching for her, without fully admitting it to himself. There she was, sitting alone at a table by the far corner, her gaze fixed on something just outside the window. To his surprise, she looked almost sad. "I'm gonna go talk to her," Lucas said suddenly, standing up. "Wait, what?" Sam's voice was a mix of surprise and reluctant admiration. "Dude, what are you even gonna say?" "I don't know," Lucas admitted, heart pounding. "But she looks lonely." He crossed the cafeteria, the noise fading to a dull hum as he approached her table. She looked up when he was a few feet away, her expression as unreadable as ever. "Hey," he said, trying to keep his voice casual. "Mind if I sit here?" Lyra hesitated, her eyes flickering with something, wariness maybe? But she nodded, gesturing to the seat across from her. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. Lucas cleared his throat, searching for something, anything to break the quiet. "So, how are you finding it here?" he asked finally. "Small town, small school. I guess it's a lot to take in?" She tilted her head, considering his question. "It's different," she said carefully. "I'm used to places that feel bigger. This place, it's like it exists in a little bubble, isolated." "Yeah," Lucas chuckled. "That's pretty much Stanton for you. The town that time forgot." Lyra's lips curved into a small, tentative smile, and Lucas felt a strange warmth spread through him. She had a way of making him feel seen, in a way no one else ever had. And yet, there was a barrier there, some invisible wall she'd built around herself. "Can I ask you something?" he said, surprising himself with the boldness of his own question. She met his gaze, her expression guarded. "You can ask." "What brought you here? I mean, people don't usually just show up in Stanton. Most of us are, born and raised." Lyra's gaze drifted past him, back to the window, as though searching for something only she could see. "I suppose you could say I'm looking for a fresh start." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "A fresh start?" "Yes." She looked down at her hands, almost as if she were hiding something within them. "Sometimes you need to leave everything behind to understand what you truly want." The words lingered in the air between them, heavy with something unspoken. Lucas felt a chill run down his spine, as if she were hinting at something far beyond his understanding. "You ever miss what you left behind?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lyra's expression softened, and for a moment he thought he saw a flicker of pain in her eyes. "All the time," she murmured, so quietly he barely heard her. Lucas wanted to ask more, to dig deeper, but something told him he wouldn't get far. Lyra's world was a mystery, one that intrigued and unsettled him in equal measure. And though he couldn't explain why, he knew, deep down, that she wasn't just a girl running from her past, she was something else entirely. Lucas couldn't get her out of his mind. Every glance Lyra threw his way was like a riddle wrapped in silence, and every fleeting smile seemed to hint at worlds he couldn't see. He found himself noticing the little things she did, the way her eyes would trace patterns in the clouds, her habit of touching every leaf and blade of grass as if each one held a secret. It was well into October now, and the days were growing shorter. After school, the shadows lengthened faster, the early twilight casting the town in an eerie, dreamlike glow. And in the hushed quiet of those fall afternoons, Lucas found himself drawn to Lyra's side, unable to resist the pull of her mystery. "Why do you look at the sky so much?" he asked one afternoon as they sat on the bleachers, watching the clouds roll over the football field. Lyra's gaze remained on the sky, her expression far away. "Because it reminds me of home," she replied softly, as if the word itself was too fragile to hold. Lucas chuckled, trying to shake off the weight in her words. "What, you mean you're from, Denver or something?" Her lips quirked, but there was no mirth in her eyes. "Farther," she said, and though her voice was quiet, it cut through the empty field like a shot. "Farther?" he echoed, feeling a prick of unease. "What, like another country?" She shook her head, a shadow flickering across her face. "I can't really explain. Not yet." "You don't trust me?" he blurted, surprising himself with the force of his own words. Lyra turned to him, her eyes searching his face, as if weighing some inner decision. "It's not that," she said carefully. "It's just, there are things about me that might be hard to believe." Lucas hesitated, feeling the weight of her words settling over him. "Try me," he whispered, voice rough. She seemed to consider him, eyes narrowing, as though peeling back layers of his mind. Finally, she let out a soft sigh and turned away. "Not today, Lucas, but soon." They kept meeting in those secret moments after school, beneath trees and in quiet corners where the world seemed to fade. Each time, Lucas asked a little more, hoping she'd reveal some sliver of herself. But Lyra was as elusive as smoke, her answers dancing around the truth without ever quite touching it. One afternoon, as they sat on the edge of the town's small park, Lyra seemed particularly distracted. She kept glancing over her shoulder, her gaze darting to the shadows stretching over the playground. "Is something wrong?" Lucas asked, lowering his voice instinctively. Lyra's jaw tensed, her hand clenching around the edge of the bench. "I feel like I'm being watched," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Lucas looked around, heart pounding. "By who?" "I don't know," she whispered. Her eyes held a flicker of fear, one he'd never seen before. "But they're getting closer." A chill settled over him, his pulse quickening. "What are you talking about? Who's getting closer?" She shook her head, biting her lip. "It's complicated." Lucas let out an exasperated sigh, running a hand through his hair. "Lyra, you keep saying that, but I can't help you if you won't tell me what's going on." She turned to him then, her gaze fierce and desperate. "Maybe it's better if you don't help me, Lucas. Maybe it's better if you don't know." "Too late for that," he replied stubbornly. "Look, you don't have to tell me everything, just tell me enough." Lyra hesitated, her fingers playing with the edge of her jacket. Finally, she glanced around, as if checking once more that they were alone. "There are people from where I come from who are looking for me, people who won't stop until they find me." Lucas swallowed, his mouth suddenly dry. "Why? What do they want with you?" She met his gaze, her eyes burning with an intensity that made him shiver. "They want to take me back to a life I didn't choose, to a role I don't want. They'll do anything to make sure I return." "So, you're on the run?" Lucas whispered, his voice barely audible. "Yes." She paused, her gaze softening. "But it's more than that. It's complicated." Lucas chuckled darkly, shaking his head. "Yeah, I'm starting to get that." They sat in silence, the weight of her confession settling between them like a fog. Part of Lucas wanted to press her, to demand she tell him everything, but another part of him, the part that had grown attached to her quiet mystery, knew better. Lyra would reveal herself in her own time, and pushing her wouldn't make the truth any easier to hear. It was nearing dusk when they heard it, a low hum, almost like the purr of an engine but deeper, vibrating through the air. Lucas felt it before he heard it, a strange prickling sensation along his skin. "What is that?" he asked, glancing around. Lyra's face went pale, her eyes widening in horror. "They're here," she whispered, barely breathing. "What? Who's here?" Lucas's heart raced, a mix of fear and confusion surging through him. Without another word, Lyra grabbed his hand, yanking him to his feet. "We have to go. Now." They sprinted across the park, feet pounding against the earth as the hum grew louder, filling the air with a strange, electrifying tension. Lucas felt a thrill of fear pulse through him, his mind racing with questions he couldn't voice. As they reached the edge of the park, Lyra pulled him into a narrow alley, pressing her back against the wall, her chest heaving. She kept glancing up at the sky, her expression filled with a dread Lucas had never seen before. "Lyra, what's going on?" he demanded, struggling to catch his breath. "They've found me," she replied, her voice a ragged whisper. "I don't know how, but they've found me." "Who?" he asked, his voice rising in panic. "Who's found you?" She shook her head, biting her lip. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." "Try me," Lucas shot back, his voice laced with desperation. Lyra hesitated, her gaze locked onto his. Finally, she took a deep breath, as if steeling herself. "They're not from here," she said slowly. "They're from far away, very far away." It took a moment for her words to sink in, and when they did, Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. "You mean, like, aliens?" She nodded, her eyes filled with an unspeakable sadness. "Yes, and I'm one of them." The words hung between them, echoing in the quiet of the alley. Lucas's mind spun, his heart racing as he tried to process what she was saying. You're not human?" "No," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "I was sent here to escape, to hide, but now they've come to take me back." Lucas stared at her, struggling to breathe. "But why? Why would they do that?" "Because I'm—" She hesitated, her gaze falling. "Because I'm not just anyone. I'm royalty, a princess, and they need me to return to fulfill my duty." A cold shock washed over him, the enormity of her words crashing down on him like a wave. "So, you're saying you're an alien princess?" "Yes," she replied, her voice tinged with regret. "And if they find me, I'll have to leave." Lucas's head spun, 1,000 questions racing through his mind. But before he could say anything else, he heard it, the hum louder now, closer. Lyra's face filled with panic, her eyes darting to the end of the alley. "We have to move," she whispered urgently. "They're almost here." Lucas felt his heart hammering in his chest, his body tingling with fear and adrenaline. "Where do we go?" She took his hand, her grip tight, almost desperate. "There's a place in the forest. It's hidden. They might not be able to track us there." Without another word, they took off, running through the twilight toward the edge of town. The hum followed them, growing louder, filling the air with a strange, unnatural energy that prickled along his skin. As they entered the darkened forest, Lyra's grip on his hand tightened, her step sure and swift even as the path disappeared into the shadows. Lucas didn't know where they were going, or how they would evade whoever, or whatever, was after them. But one thing was certain. He wasn't about to let Lyra face this alone. And as they plunged deeper into the darkness, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life would never be the same. The night air was thick with tension, shadows draping the trees as Lucas and Lyra dashed deeper into the forest. The hum behind them had faded for now, but Lyra's grip on his hand remained firm, her fingers trembling. "Where are we going?" Lucas asked, his voice barely a whisper as they wove through the underbrush. "There's a place," she said breathlessly, "somewhere they won't think to look, but we have to keep moving." The forest around them grew denser, swallowing up the last traces of twilight. Lucas stumbled over roots and rocks, his mind reeling with everything Lyra had revealed. She was a princess from another world, on the run from forces that wanted to reclaim her, to pull her back into a life she'd tried so hard to escape. He stole glances at her as they ran, her face tense but resolute, eyes narrowed in concentration. There was a strength there he hadn't seen before, a quiet resolve that made him both proud and afraid. After what felt like miles, they came to a small clearing shrouded in darkness. Lyra stopped, releasing his hand as she caught her breath. She looked up at the sky, her gaze darting from star to star. "They're still searching," she murmured, almost to herself, "but this place, it should shield us for now." Lucas nodded, still struggling to process everything. "Lyra," he began hesitantly, "why did you come here? I mean, all the way to Earth of all places?" Lyra's gaze softened, a flicker of sadness crossing her face. Because Earth is quiet, and there's beauty in the quietness here. My world is loud. It's filled with expectations, responsibilities. There was never any place for me to just be Lyra. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Here, I could be whoever I wanted, even if it was just for a little while. Lucas swallowed, unsure of what to say. So, you ran away from being a princess? Her lips quirked in a faint smile. Not exactly the fairy tale you were expecting, is it? I don't know. I think I get it, he replied quietly. Wanting to be yourself, without everyone else deciding what that means. She looked at him, eyes softening. Thank you, Lucas, for understanding, for all of this. They stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of the forest settling around them. But just as Lucas felt a fragile sense of calm begin to return, a low hum echoed from above, faint but unmistakable. Lyra's face tightened, her body tensing. They're here, she whispered, her voice a tremor of fear. What do we do? Lucas asked, his heart racing. She looked up at the sky, her gaze hardening. I have to face them. I can't keep running forever. No! Lucas grabbed her arm, his voice laced with desperation. You said you didn't want this. Why should you have to go back just because they say so? Lucas, it's not that simple, she replied, a note of regret in her voice. There's a whole world out there that depends on me. Whether I want it or not, I have a responsibility. But what about what you want? He asked, his voice breaking. You deserve to be free, Lyra. You deserve to choose. She hesitated, and for a moment he saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. But then the hum grew louder, filling the air with an electric tension. A beam of light broke through the trees, illuminating the clearing, and Lyra stepped forward, her face set in a grim mask of determination. I won't let them hurt you, she said softly, glancing back at him. No matter what happens, remember that. Before Lucas could reply, a figure appeared in the beam of light, a tall, armored silhouette with eyes that glinted like steel. The figure moved forward, each step measured and deliberate, and Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. Princess Lyra, the figure intoned, voice cold and metallic. You have caused quite enough trouble. Lyra raised her chin, her voice steady. I am not going back with you. The figure's expression did not change. You have no choice. Your people demand your return, and your father has ordered that you comply. I don't care what he ordered, Lyra shot back, her voice filled with defiance. I am not his puppet, and I will not be used to further his war. Lucas's mind raced, his fists clenching. She's not going anywhere with you, he shouted, stepping forward despite the terror curling in his stomach. The figure turned to him, its gaze narrowing. And you are an earthling. This does not concern you. It does concern him, Lyra interrupted, her voice firm. Lucas is my friend, and I won't let you hurt him. For a moment, a flicker of surprise crossed the figure's face, but it was gone as quickly as it came. Princess, you will either return willingly, or we will be forced to— Stop! Lyra's voice rang out, filled with a fierce authority Lucas had never heard before. I will not be a pawn in your games anymore. If you want me, you'll have to accept my terms. The figure hesitated, a trace of uncertainty flashing across its face. What terms? I will return, she said, her voice resolute. But only if you guarantee peace. No more war, no more power struggles. I want my people to be free. The figure's gaze darkened. You are in no position to make demands. Lucas felt anger surge through him, his body tensing. She's standing up for her people, he shouted. If you really cared about her, you'd listen. Lyra placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle. Thank you, Lucas, but this is my fight. The figure studied her for a moment before letting out a reluctant sigh. Very well, Princess. I will relay your terms to your father. But know this, if he rejects them, we will return, and next time, there will be no negotiations. Lyra nodded, her expression calm but weary. Understood. The figure stepped back, its gaze flicking to Lucas one last time before retreating into the light. As the hum grew louder, the beam of light enveloped the figure, lifting it into the sky. In a flash, it was gone, leaving only the echo of its warning in the night air. Lucas turned to Lyra, his heart pounding. So, that's it? You're leaving? She looked at him, eyes shimmering with sadness. I have to, Lucas. My people need me, and if I can bring peace, maybe it will all be worth it. He felt his throat tighten. But what about you? What about us? Lyra reached out, her hand brushing his cheek. You've given me something no one else ever has. A chance to be free, if only for a little while. And I'll never forget that. Then stay, he whispered, his voice breaking. Please, stay. Tears glistened in her eyes, but she shook her head. I can't. Not yet. Lucas swallowed, fighting the wave of emotion threatening to drown him. Will I ever see you again? She gave him a small, sad smile. Perhaps. In another time. Another place. She stepped back, her gaze lingering on his face as though trying to memorize every line. Goodbye, Lucas. The hum returned, louder and brighter this time, a beam of light illuminating her figure. Lucas reached out, his fingers brushing hers for the briefest moment before the light grew blinding, engulfing her in its radiance. And just like that, she was gone. Lucas stood alone in the clearing, the silence pressing down on him like a weight. He stared up at the night sky, a hollow ache settling in his chest as he searched for any sign of her. But there was nothing, just the stars, distant and unfeeling, twinkling against the darkness. And then as he watched, one of the stars shifted, a faint, tiny flicker that moved across the sky before disappearing beyond the horizon. A message, a promise, a whisper of goodbye. The air in the grand hall of Zeralith was laced with anticipation. Silver and emerald banners draped the vast walls, flickering as beams of light refracted off crystalline pillars that lined the long aisle. Alien dignitaries in layered robes clustered in the shadows, murmuring in hushed tones, glancing toward the human contingent that had arrived from Earth just that morning. To them, humans were fragile yet intriguing, a paradox of intelligence and impulsive behavior. At the head of the hall, seated upon a throne of glistening obsidian, was Princess Zyra. Her gaze, cold and calculated, swept over the crowd, lingering briefly on the humans before she addressed her attendants with a faint nod. Her features were angular, a masterpiece of elegance and strength, framed by shimmering locks that cascaded in silvery waves. She was clad in the traditional armor of her station, a fusion of metal and fabric that caught the light in shifting hues, marking her as the keeper of Zeralith's secrets. Alex felt the weight of her gaze. Standing among his Earth delegation, he adjusted his collar, trying to hide his nervous energy. He was chosen for his insight into alien biology and cultural studies, but nothing in his training could have prepared him for the sight of Princess Zyra. She was, quite simply, mesmerizing. Beside him, Commander Gray's stern voice cut through his thoughts. Eyes up, Alex. Remember why we're here. Alex nodded, tearing his gaze away. Yes, sir, he replied, his voice steadier than he felt. Yet he couldn't resist a final glance at Zyra, as if something in her guarded expression called to him. The formalities began, with a series of stilted greetings exchanged between the humans and Zyra's advisors. Yet amid the carefully measured words, Alex sensed an underlying tension, as if everyone in the room was holding their breath. Finally, Zyra rose from her throne. The movement was fluid, yet her presence radiated a quiet power that silenced the hall. She took a step forward, her gaze locking onto Alex, and a slight tilt of her head suggested intrigue rather than hostility. Earthlings, she began, her voice resonant, with an accent that carried a rhythm unfamiliar yet enchanting. You are welcome here, as guests of Zeralith. It has been long since we last hosted members of your kind. A murmur passed through the hall as she paused, her eyes still on Alex, who felt a strange chill as if she could see through him, reading his thoughts and intentions. However, Zira continued, her tone dipping into something more personal, our worlds remain vastly different, our cultures and customs often in opposition. To bridge this divide, I have granted permission for one among you to join me for a more intimate study of our ways. Her gaze sharpened. To learn what you cannot through mere observation. The murmurs intensified, but Alex only felt the world narrowing around him. Her invitation was unprecedented, and everyone knew it. Zyralith's royal family rarely engaged in direct interactions, especially with outsiders. This was a chance, one he couldn't let slip. Commander Gray's hand landed on Alex's shoulder. "It's you she's chosen," he said in a low voice, his expression unreadable. "Me?" Alex whispered, swallowing as he glanced at Zira, who stood as if waiting. Commander Gray's grip tightened. "Remember, Alex, this isn't just some casual chat. You represent all of Earth. Keep your wits about you." Taking a deep breath, Alex stepped forward, trying to match Zira's calm confidence. As he approached, the room seemed to fade, leaving only him and the alien princess, locked in an unspoken understanding. "Princess Zyra," he began, bowing as custom dictated, "I am honored by this opportunity." He kept his words measured, aware that he was treading on unfamiliar territory. Zyra's eyes softened, a barely perceptible change that only he seemed to notice. "Curious," she murmured, just loud enough for him to hear. "A man of science, yet filled with doubt. Tell me, does Earth's curiosity always mask so much fear?" Alex hesitated, her words cutting through him. "Fear isn't quite the word," he said carefully. "Respect, perhaps. We're in awe of what we don't understand." Zira's gaze lingered, as if measuring his response. "A fair answer," she conceded, motioning for him to follow. They walked together toward a side corridor, leaving the stairs and whispers behind. As they entered the passage, the sounds of the grand hall faded, replaced by the soft hum of the crystalline walls. The corridor led to a private chamber, dimly lit and adorned with strange artifacts that seemed to shimmer with an inner life. Zira moved gracefully to a seat, gesturing for Alex to take the one opposite her. The walls, translucent and veined with luminous patterns, made the room feel otherworldly. "Tell me, Alex," she said, leaning slightly forward, her gaze intense. "What do you seek to learn from us?" Alex paused, aware that this wasn't a question to answer lightly. "I came here to understand how Zyralith thrives in harmony with its technology, to learn about your people's relationship with their environment, and perhaps—" He hesitated, choosing his next words carefully, "to bridge the gaps between our worlds." Zira arched an eyebrow. "You speak of lofty goals, yet I sense hesitation. Do you doubt yourself, or is it our way that troubles you?" Alex met her gaze, feeling the weight of her scrutiny. "It's neither," he admitted. "I suppose I wonder if the differences between us are too great to bridge, but I'm willing to try." A faint smile touched her lips, elusive and fleeting. "A scientist with resolve," she mused almost to herself. "Perhaps I was right to choose you." Their conversation wove between topics, from cultural differences to scientific principles, each probing the boundaries of the other's understanding. Zira's questions were sharp, often catching Alex off guard, but he matched her, bringing his own insights to the exchange. They found themselves lingering over subjects that seemed trivial, yet somehow significant in this secluded space. As the hours passed, Zira leaned back, her gaze shifting to the walls where faint shadows danced, the patterns responding to her presence. She seemed almost vulnerable, a strange contrast to the unyielding figure he'd seen in the grand hall. "Your kind often look to the stars," she remarked quietly, "yet you struggle with what lies within yourselves. Why is that?" Alex considered her words, sensing a deeper meaning beneath her question. "We're explorers by nature, The unknown calls to us, I suppose. Yet here you are, she said, voice softening. In the heart of Zeralith, the unknown before you. Her eyes met his, and in that moment he felt an invisible thread between them, fragile yet undeniable. The silence stretched, and before he could fully understand it, Zira spoke, her voice low. Alex, I invited you here not simply to share knowledge, but to understand what your world has that ours lacks. Her admission lingered, heavy with implication. He felt the weight of her words, an unspoken truth nestled within them. The mystery she hinted at stirred something within him, a strange curiosity, but also a growing desire to see beyond the cold facade she maintained. What is it? He asked, voice steady. That you wish to know? She studied him, eyes darkening with an emotion he couldn't place. I let you get close, Earthling, she murmured. Now show me more. Alex's mind spun, Zyra's words reverberating in his thoughts. Now show me more. She was unlike anyone he'd met, unpredictable, guarded, and intensely observant. Her words were neither a command nor a question, more a challenge, veiled in curiosity and expectation. Clearing his throat, he took a steadying breath. I'd be glad to, Princess, though I'll admit I'm still trying to understand what more means here, on Zeralith. A faint, amused smile traced her lips. Then tell me, Alex, if you were given one day to show an alien what it means to be human, what would you show? The question caught him off guard. He took a moment, shifting in his seat as he considered it, and finally replied, I think I'd show them the little things, like the way our world changes with the seasons, or how a child smiles at something as simple as a sunset. He looked at her, hoping his words conveyed what he struggled to express. For us, it's those moments that define us, our need to connect with things greater than ourselves. Zira regarded him with an intensity that bordered on unsettling, her gaze unwavering. Connection. It's something your people speak of frequently, yet rarely master, she murmured, almost to herself. And perhaps that is why I've called you here. She rose from her seat with a graceful movement, beckoning him to follow her further down the corridor. The walls shimmered, their luminescent veins shifting colors as they walked, casting a spectrum of light onto her face. Alex followed, feeling as though he were being led deeper into the heart of something he couldn't yet grasp. Tell me, Alex, she said over her shoulder, her voice echoing slightly in the narrow hall. What drives you? What is it you seek among the stars? He hesitated, caught off guard by the directness of the question. I suppose it's the mystery that calls to me, he replied thoughtfully. I'm fascinated by what's beyond our understanding. Meeting other life forms, seeing how they live, it's something beyond anything we ever dreamed. And maybe, he hesitated, feeling a vulnerability creeping in. I suppose I hope it might help us find our own place in the universe. Zyra turned to him, her expression unreadable. And you think you will find that here? On Zeralith. Maybe, he replied, offering a faint smile. Or maybe I just thought it was worth trying. They reached the end of the corridor, stepping into a vast chamber filled with floating orbs of blue light that hovered in the air, illuminating the room in a soft, ethereal glow. Surrounding them were crystalline pillars that stretched toward a vaulted ceiling, where intricate symbols were carved, winding like vines over the stone. The whole place felt ancient, yet alive, as though it pulsed with the memories of 1,000 years. This is the Hall of Origins, Zyra said, her voice reverent as though the words were an invocation. Every ruler of Zeralith has walked through these halls, guided by the wisdom of those who came before. Here we seek clarity, a deeper understanding of our purpose. She took a step forward, her hand brushing against one of the floating orbs, which responded by pulsing with a vibrant glow, casting an intricate pattern across her face. Princess, what do you seek? Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper, not wanting to break the sanctity of the moment. Zira looked at him, her expression softening, her defenses seemingly lowering, if only for a moment. I am my people's leader, their protector, but there is much that is hidden from us. My own life has been shaped by ancient traditions, bound by duty and expectation. She paused, searching for words. But there are things that go beyond duty. Curiosities, desires I am forbidden to explore. It is a lonely path. He felt a pang of empathy, and for the first time saw Zira not as an untouchable alien royalty, but as someone bound by restrictions as real as his own fears. Lonely? He echoed. I think that's something we understand well. She glanced at him, intrigued. Explain. Well, it's that sense of feeling alone, even when surrounded by people, he said, his voice quiet. Of not being understood. You feel it when you're different, when you're striving for something no one else can see. Zira was silent, her gaze distant as she absorbed his words. Then perhaps that is why you were chosen to come here, to understand what others cannot. He nodded, feeling a connection growing, a rare understanding that bridged the gap between their worlds. It was a fragile thing, but in that quiet chamber, surrounded by ancient symbols and softly glowing light, it felt real. But before he could say more, a loud chime echoed through the hall, breaking the stillness. Zira's expression shifted, her regal mask slipping back into place as she straightened. Princess. A voice called from a shadowed archway. A tall figure in dark armor stepped forward, General Kale, Zira's most trusted advisor and guardian. His severe gaze swept over Alex, lingering with a faint hint of disapproval. I apologize for the intrusion, but the Council has requested your presence. There are matters that require immediate attention. Zira's expression hardened. The Council's concerns can wait. I am occupied. The general hesitated, his eyes narrowing. If I may, Princess, it involves the arrival of the Earth delegation. His gaze shifted pointedly to Alex. Alex felt the tension rise in the room, an unspoken challenge hanging between them. He'd encountered the general briefly when they arrived, but Kale's demeanor now held a subtle hostility, a silent accusation. Very well, Zira replied, her tone clipped. But know this, Kale. The Earthling is here under my invitation. He is to be treated as a guest of honor. Kale's jaw tightened, but he bowed, offering a curt nod. Of course, Princess. With one last glance at Alex, the general turned and disappeared down the corridor. Zira let out a breath, her expression shifting as she returned her focus to Alex. There are those who see your presence here as a threat, she said quietly. To them, you represent the unknown, and with it, danger. Alex tried to mask his surprise. I came in peace, to learn. And yet, she said, a hint of sadness in her voice. Fear often overshadows reason. She moved closer, her gaze intent. But you will stay, Alex. I want to understand your world and share mine with you, even if others resist. Her words carried a weight he couldn't fully comprehend, but he nodded, feeling a strange resolve take hold. I'm not going anywhere, Princess. Good. A rare, genuine smile touched her lips. Then we will continue our exploration, our understanding. But... She glanced back toward the entrance where Kale had stood moments ago. We must be cautious. There are those who would seek to disrupt this connection, to keep us divided. Alex took a steadying breath, understanding the risks, but feeling a growing resolve. I'm willing to take that chance, Zira. If you are. A glimmer of approval shone in her eyes. Then let us proceed, Earthling. But remember, you walk a path of secrets now, and there will be no turning back. They moved deeper into the Hall of Origins, their footsteps echoing in the ancient space, the walls seeming to pulse with the unspoken stories of those who had walked here before. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this was the start of something momentous, a journey that would test him in ways he could never have imagined. As they passed under an archway adorned with strange symbols, Zira paused, resting her hand against the stone, her expression distant. "These symbols," she said softly, "represent the foundation of our beliefs. Each one tells a story, a lesson passed down through generations. It is said that only those who truly seek knowledge can decipher them." Alex studied the symbols, intricate and mysterious, feeling an inexplicable pull toward them. "What do they mean?" Zyra's gaze softened as she traced a finger over one of the symbols, a delicate, swirling pattern. "This one," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "means unity. The bond that transcends difference, that bridges worlds." Her eyes met his, and he felt a current of unspoken understanding pass between them. Before he could respond, a distant sound, a low, resonant hum, filled the chamber, and a series of lights flickered in the distance. Zira's expression hardened, the moment of vulnerability vanishing. "We are not alone," she murmured, her tone shifting. "Follow me, and be silent." Together they moved quickly but carefully down the corridor, the hum growing louder, an urgent, ominous rhythm that seemed to pulse through the walls. Alex's heart raced as they approached a side passage, Zyra leading him into a hidden alcove where they were shielded from view. In the dim light he saw her face, tense and alert. "Stay close," she whispered, her hand brushing his arm, a gesture of protection and reassurance. As the footsteps approached, he felt the weight of the moment settle upon him. This was no longer a mere exchange of knowledge, a polite, diplomatic mission. It was something far deeper, an entangling of lives and worlds that could no longer be undone. The stakes had shifted, and he could feel the weight of it pressing down, the path ahead shrouded in mystery, danger, and a connection he couldn't begin to define. The hum faded, leaving Alex and Zyra in an uneasy silence. The dim alcove around them felt stifling, and Alex sensed something electric in the air between them, as if they both knew that whatever came next would alter everything. "Who was that?" he whispered, keeping his voice low. "Sentinels," Zyra replied, her gaze distant. "Guardians of our most guarded secrets. They serve the council, and they follow without question." A beat passed between them, her words heavy with meaning. "They don't know about this chamber," she added, gesturing to the alcove, a place hidden within the heart of the Hall of Origins. "This was my mother's refuge." Alex could see the tension in her shoulders, the lingering sadness in her eyes. "You trusted me enough to bring me here," he said softly, realizing the significance of her choice. "Even knowing what's at stake?" Zyra's gaze softened as she turned to him, and he felt the weight of her decision hanging in the air between them. "I chose you because I believe in your intentions, Alex. There's something about you that defies the expectations others place on you." He let her words sink in, feeling an inexplicable warmth despite the shadows pressing in around them. He wanted to say something, anything to ease the tension, but just as he opened his mouth, a sudden flash of movement caught his eye. Kyle stood at the entrance to the chamber, his face shadowed but unmistakably stern. "Princess," he said, his voice low and taut, "there are pressing matters to discuss. You were not authorized to enter here, much less with—" He glanced at Alex, his expression unreadable. "A foreigner." Zyra's eyes hardened. "Kale, if I am to lead, I must understand all who walk within my domain. The humans are not our enemies." Kale's gaze sharpened. "That remains to be seen. They seek knowledge of our ways, Princess, but at what cost to us?" Alex shifted uncomfortably, feeling the weight of Kale's words. He took a step forward, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "I didn't come to take anything from you, General. I only came to learn, to share what I know, and—" Cal cut him off with a sharp glare. "Your people think they can take without consequence, Earthling. History has shown us what such curiosity can lead to." A tense silence settled, the kind that thickened the air and prickled the skin. But Zyra, with calm authority, placed a hand on Kale's shoulder, an unspoken command in her touch. "Enough, Kale," she said quietly, yet her voice held a finality that stilled him. Your loyalty is unwavering, and for that I am grateful. But this is my choice, my path. Kale's jaw tightened, but he gave a curt nod. Very well, Princess, but be warned, this path leads through shadows. The council will not be as forgiving. He turned and left, his footsteps echoing down the corridor, leaving them alone once more in the chamber. Alex felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Kale's words hung over him, a grim reminder of the walls that still stood between him and Zira's world. But Zira's gaze didn't waver. Alex, I believe the time has come, she said, her tone low and resolute. There's something you must see, something hidden even from the council. It will answer questions that we, have not dared to ask. She gestured for him to follow her through a narrow passage that wound deeper into the hall. Alex's heart raced as they ventured further, leaving behind the familiar chambers, stepping into an area cloaked in darkness, lit only by the faint phosphorescent glow of Zira's hand on the walls. After several moments, they reached a wide circular chamber, unlike any he'd seen on Ziralith. The walls were lined with holographic displays, each flickering with images of stars, planets, and human figures blurred and flickering like faint echoes. What is this? Alex murmured, transfixed. Zira's voice was soft but filled with something he hadn't heard from her before. Vulnerability. It is called the Vault of Forgotten Paths. This place holds the lost history of our people's first contact with Earth. He felt a chill run down his spine. But I thought, you said your people had never encountered humans before. That is what the council wanted you to believe, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. They have hidden the truth, not just from you, but from our own people. She stepped forward, gesturing to one of the holographic displays. It flickered to life, showing an image of what looked like a human spacecraft, weathered and worn, drifting through the darkness of space. Figures in spacesuits moved within, their faces hidden behind reflective visors. This ship was found orbiting our star system centuries ago, Zira explained, her eyes locked on the projection. The council decided to erase any knowledge of its arrival, fearing it would disrupt our way of life. But I have seen the records. I know that there were humans here long before any official contact was made. Alex felt his pulse quicken. Why keep it a secret? Fear, she replied simply. The council feared that knowledge of an advanced civilization so close to our own would create division, spark curiosity, weaken our hold on tradition. They chose to protect Ziralith by hiding the truth, by keeping us isolated. He absorbed her words, a slow realization dawning. And you don't agree with them. Zira shook her head. I believe that our people deserve to know, that we deserve the chance to understand and connect, not live in ignorance. The bond between us, Alex, it is more than curiosity. It is the beginning of a truth that has been buried for too long. He took her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin, her pulse steady beneath his fingers. Then let's bring it to light, together. But before he could say more, the chamber's alarms blared, the walls flashing a warning red. The doors slid open, and Kyle stepped through, flanked by 2 guards. Princess, he said, his voice steely, this ends now. You have gone too far. Zira stood her ground, her voice unwavering. Kale, the council has deceived us. Our people deserve to know the truth. Kale's expression was unyielding. The council does what is best for our world, for you. The Earthling's influence has clouded your judgment. He must leave Ziralith, or face the consequences. Alex felt the guards gaze on him, their hands ready on their weapons. But Zira stepped between them, her voice calm and firm. If you wish to harm him, you will go through me. A tense silence fell over the room, a standoff of unspoken loyalties and hidden fears. Kale's gaze softened for a moment, a flicker of regret crossing his face. You were always too curious, Princess, he murmured, too willing to see things others could not. Then allow me to see this through, she replied quietly. Allow me to guide our people into the future, unbound by fear. Kale looked at her, his resolve faltering. "You are our future, Zira," he said, his voice breaking. "But if you reveal this, it will destroy you." Zira held his gaze, a finality in her eyes. "Then let it. I choose the path of truth." With a sharp nod, Kale signaled to the guards, who lowered their weapons. He turned, leaving them alone once more in the vault. Alex let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Zira, are you sure about this?" She nodded, her face resolute. "The path we are on is dangerous, Alex, but I believe it is the right one." Together, they activated the vault's central console, the holograms shifting to project the hidden history of Ziralith's first contact with Earth. The images lit up the room in a cascade of stars and distant worlds, secrets unfolding in a web of light and shadow. Zira turned to him, her gaze steady. "This is only the beginning, Alex. Together, we will build a bridge that no force can tear down." He nodded, feeling the weight of their decisions settle over him. They had chosen the truth, and with it, a path that would change their worlds forever.